The mop slipped right out of his hands and hit the marble floor with a sharp crack, the sound bouncing down the empty hallway like a confession he hadn't meant to make. Daniel went completely still, his breath locked in his throat, as if the building itself was watching him. He had no business being here. Not under these circumstances, not at this hour, not pushing a mop. But life has a funny way of rewriting your story without ever asking how you feel about it. And tonight, inside this towering glass building where million-dollar decisions got made before lunch, a single dad with heavy eyes and worn-down shoes was about to change everything, and he didn't even see it coming. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet strength of people who never quit, take a second right now to like this video, share it with someone who could use some hope, and subscribe to the channel. And drop a comment telling us where in the world you're watching from. Daniel Carter had once been a guy with a steady paycheck, a predictable routine, and a future that felt manageable. He worked as a maintenance technician at a mid-sized company, bringing home just enough to keep the lights on and the pantry stocked. His whole world was built around one person. His daughter Lily, a bright-eyed 7-year-old who was absolutely convinced her dad could fix anything, broken toys, bad moods, and everything in between. Then the company folded overnight, a sudden financial collapse that nobody saw coming, and Daniel's carefully held-together life started coming apart at the seams. Bills stacked up like quiet ultimatums. Rent notices grew more frequent, then more aggressive. The refrigerator got a little emptier every week. Daniel threw himself at every option available. Job applications, walk-ins, short-term gigs, but nothing held. And through every single one of those hard days, Lily kept right on smiling, kept right on believing in him. That was the part that hurt most, because he knew that eventually she'd see through the brave face he put on every morning. The night cleaning position wasn't a choice he made. It was a door he walked through because every other door had already closed. The pay was modest, the hours were punishing, and the work was the kind that goes completely unnoticed. He mopped floors that executives crossed without a second glance. Empty trash cans full of things people tossed away without a thought. But to Daniel, it meant groceries. It meant the heating bill got paid. It meant Lily slept warm. Every single night before he left, he'd pull her blanket up, press a kiss to her forehead, and whisper promises he was working overtime to keep. Then he'd head out into the cold and make his way downtown to that glass tower, where the real grind started. The building had a strange energy after hours. Empty desks lined up in the dark, computer screens glowing on standby, the low hum of equipment filling the silence in a way that felt both calming and deeply lonely. Daniel moved through each floor with quiet efficiency, cleaning, wiping things down, patching up small issues whenever he spotted them. And he always spotted them. Loose wires, lights on the verge of going out, odd sounds coming from inside the walls. It was just how his brain worked. It was who he'd always been. One particular night, while working his way through the executive floor, something stopped him. A faint clicking sound, barely noticeable, was coming from somewhere inside one of the server rooms. It wasn't loud enough to alarm anyone, but it was off, and Daniel knew the difference. Most people would have kept walking. That wasn't his department, wasn't his problem. But Daniel wasn't wired that way. He stood at the door for a moment, fully aware he wasn't cleared to go inside. This area was strictly for IT staff and upper management. Still, that sound kept pulling at him like an alarm only he could hear. He pushed the door open. The room was a grid of blinking servers, their indicator lights flickering in patterns that felt almost like a language. The clicking was unmistakable now, sharp, uneven, and wrong in a way that sat heavy in his gut. His years of hands-on experience told him immediately. Something was failing, and it wasn't something small. He traced it to a cooling unit that had stopped doing its job. The temperature inside the server rack was already climbing, and if it kept going, the consequences would be severe. Data loss, system failure, a full operational shutdown. Thousands, maybe millions of dollars in damage, all quietly building in a room no one thought to check. Daniel didn't stop to weigh the risks. He didn't think about whether this would get him fired. He just focused on the problem in front of him. Working with the basic tools he had on his cleaning cart and the technical knowledge stored in his hands and his head, he carefully opened the panel, found the loose connection, cleared out the blocked vent, and restarted the cooling unit. It was stressful, focused work. Sweat dripped off him as he raced the clock, with no way of knowing if he'd caught it in time. Then, after several long minutes, the clicking went quiet. The hum evened out. The temperature started dropping back down to normal. The whole crisis dissolved as silently as it had started. Daniel exhaled slowly, wiped his face, and stood back. He wasn't entirely sure what he had just prevented. To him, it was a problem and he'd fixed it. He packed up his tools, closed the panel, and finished his shift. Just another night. Except it wasn't. The next morning, the company's CEO, Jonathan Reeves, was going through overnight system reports when he came across a critical alert that had somehow resolved on its own. He called his IT team in and nobody had an explanation. No maintenance had been scheduled. No technician had logged in. Yet the system had been sitting right on the edge of a catastrophic failure and had been pulled back from it. He pulled the security footage. And there was Daniel, a night cleaner, a man in faded work clothes, moving through a restricted server room with calm, deliberate purpose, and fixing a crisis that the company's own technical staff hadn't even caught. Jonathan watched the footage twice, then a third time. There was nothing uncertain about the way Daniel moved. No fumbling, no guessing. Just focused, practiced hands doing exactly what needed to be done. This wasn't luck or coincidence. This was someone who genuinely knew what he was doing. Jonathan stayed at the office that evening and waited. When Daniel rolled his cleaning cart through the front doors for his shift, he had absolutely no idea that everything was about to shift. As he stepped off the elevator onto the executive floor, he noticed a man standing in the hallway, dressed sharply, posture relaxed, watching him. Daniel dropped his gaze instinctively, his stomach tightening. He figured he was in trouble. Jonathan walked toward him, his face giving nothing away. Daniel's mind went straight to Lily, straight to the thought of losing another job. But Jonathan didn't come with frustration. He came with one straightforward question. What exactly had Daniel done in that server room? Daniel answered honestly. No spin, no embellishment, just a plain account of what he'd seen and what he'd done. And right there in that quiet hallway, something changed. Jonathan wasn't looking at a janitor anymore. He was looking at a man who had been passed over, overlooked, and placed somewhere far beneath where his abilities belonged. A man with real skills, sharp instincts, and the kind of character that companies spend years trying to find and rarely do. A few days later, Daniel was offered a position on the technical maintenance team. A legitimate role, a real salary, and a genuine shot at rebuilding what had fallen apart. The first thing Daniel did when he got the news wasn't throw a party. He went home early, something that had become almost foreign to him. Lily came sprinting toward him the second he walked through the door, laughing and confused, asking why he was home before bedtime. And for the first time in longer than he could easily remember, Daniel didn't need to hide anything behind an exhausted smile. Life didn't suddenly become easy. There were still bumps, still adjustments to make. But something had come back that bills and setbacks had taken from him, and that was hope. And sometimes that one thing is enough to get a person back on their feet. Before this story wraps up, take a moment to leave a comment, maybe just a single word like hope, faith, or keep going. You'd be surprised how many people scroll through those comments on their hardest days looking for exactly that. Years down the road, Daniel would still think about that night sometimes. The mop falling, the stillness of that hallway, the moment he decided to step into a room he technically had no clearance to enter. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't look like a turning point from the outside. It was just a man doing the right thing when nobody was around to see it, and that, more than anything else, was what changed the course of his life. If this story meant something to you, don't just keep scrolling. Like the video, pass it along to someone who needs a reminder that one single moment really can turn everything around, and subscribe for more stories about the everyday courage it takes to keep going.